thank you very much, everybody who's joined us. Obviously, you've joined partly for the AGM, but also I hope for the wonderful talk that we've got on now. And we've basically been speaking to Martin Paver for the last 11 months. I think when I first reached out to him, it was November last year. And then obviously we had something unprecedented in history with coronavirus hitting us, this global pandemic, and the conversation slowed down, and we decided to go virtual with many of our webinars. And we've done a few over the summer, and they were a great success. I think everybody's becoming very accustomed to Zoom meetings and GoToWebinar and Teams meetings. So I think this is a good workaround. Obviously not quite the same as being in an auditorium live, but I think it still makes for a great session, and it probably gives the opportunity for many people who can't make it, who are outside of London, to actually participate. So in some ways there are benefits to doing it virtually. So Martin is basically going to be doing the talk. He is CEO and founder of Projecting Success. Okay, so he is a big advocate of data analytics, and in fact he's launched the Project Data Analytics Task Force, and he's in collaboration with the MPA, APM and PMI to spread the word and collaborate around project data analytics specifically. So he's got a talk now which is titled Disrupting Project Management, Are You Ready? And that's all about data-driven project delivery, and that's becoming a real reality for how we're going to look at projects going forward. I think it's fair to say that data is a huge commodity at the moment, and any organization that wants to stay at the forefront needs to manage their data very well. And so I think this talk is going to be very relevant for everybody. And without kind of spending too much more time on this, all I will say is that it's going to have an element of interaction. There will be a Mentimeter survey questionnaire which Martin will put up online, and you'll have to participate using your devices, your phones. He'll put up a code, and hopefully you can all go on to Mentimeter and participate in that. It makes it quite engaging rather than just a one-way PowerPoint presentation talk. So look forward to that as part of the talk. And there is the option to ask any questions as well, so feel free to do that. There's a questions feature on the GoToWebinar, so we'll be able to field those questions. Martin should be able to see those questions as well. And yeah, hopefully you're in for a great treat. So Martin, if you
has it crashed?
Then we'll make yeah, we can see you. Yeah, good. I can see your picture.
That's great. You broke up a bit then. I didn't know if that was your end or my end.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully most got that introduction. I tried to pad out the time between the end of the AGM and the official start time, which we had down as 6:30. But hopefully most people got that. I think the internet does play up at times, but if you're okay, then we can probably make a start. I have tried to explain that we have got the chat feature as well, and that you'll be doing the Mentimeter to actually make it interactive. And I can see you've actually got the code up as well on that slide. So I'll hand over to you, Martin, and we'll be in the background myself. And thank you also to Morris, who's in the background and supporting this event as well. He's a committee member as well. So we'll be in the background, and I look forward to your talk, Martin. Over to you.
Okay, superb. Thanks a lot, Asim, and thanks a lot for making it happen as well, because it's all down to you and your passion and sort of resilience, really, because I've done quite a few of these in the past sort of 3 or 4 months, and I know I'm difficult to get hold of sometimes. So a big thanks for sort of keep pushing this. I do appreciate it. So my name is Martin Paver, and I'm the Chief Exec of Projected Success, and I'll share a little bit about myself on 2 slides time. But the first thing I'd like to do is to find out the sort of people I'm speaking to, and then I can craft the presentation accordingly. So if you could go to menti.com and do this on your phone or your laptop, and type in code 247874, and it'll bring up this thing. So let me just maximize that. You see that okay? Is that right, Asim? You see that?
Yes, yeah, I can
Good.
see that. Which sector do you work in? It's coming through. Perfect. Very good.
Good. Excellent. So we've got some consulting people out there: finance, public sector, disputes resolution, information technology. Quite a good mix, which is great. So in terms of the experience I'll be sharing with you tonight, so real estate's on there, which is good. So there's quite a bit of construction focus tonight, because that's where I've got some really good material from, but it applies to various sectors. So keep it coming. We've got 17 people logged in so far, so we've got 17 results. And what's the total number of people tonight? Have we got a number somewhere? 56. Cool. So we could drive that sort of up to about 25, 30 people. That'd be really good. So if you can log in at menti.com 247874. We've got 21 votes. Thank you. So in terms of current job role, what's your current job role? What sort of things are you doing? Are you doing leadership roles, delivery specialists, data professionals, consultants, etc.? So we've got 1 data professional. So you probably put me right on a few things. We've got 5 consultants. Well, that's a good split. It's a really good split. So we've got 1 data professional. So they're going to be asking me all the difficult questions later. I look forward to that. Quite a few consultants. So that's good. Next question is in terms of the impact of project data analytics in the next 3 years. So it's to understand, basically, is there no impact all the way through to major impact, and if I don't adapt, then it's a risk of making me obsolete. So we can see these building up by the job roles. So we see that consultants and the leadership roles don't think it's that much of an impact. So I think I've got some news for you. Yeah, I think there's some big changes afoot. So I'll touch on that in a bit. Well, that's really interesting, actually. So when I talk to the sort of meetup that we run, we get a very different score on that. So that's quite fascinating. And there's only 3 people who think it's a major impact. So we've got 1 data professional, so that person knows what's coming probably. Delivery specialist, and another one who is a business change analyst. All right, cool. We'll just answer that one. So what's driving the rate of adoption? So from your perspective, and this could be what's making it slow to adopt, or what's making it fast in terms of adoption, what's driving it? So let's just try and understand what some of your barriers are, or some of those things that start to accelerate. If you can understand some of that. So your legacy systems, I see that away in spades, actually. Legacy systems don't support some of this. Old ways of working, a lack of knowledge, the know-how as well in terms of the implementation. I see a lot of that, and what we try and do through the community is to try and spread the word on it. What we're trying to do with BCS as well is to join up with BCS, because the apprenticeship that we run is a BCS level 4 data analyst apprenticeship. I would like to team up with you and start to drive some of this forward. So lack of knowledge, skills makes government infrastructure. So I think that's changing. I don't think it is a barrier anymore. I think if there's an appetite to do it, you can do it in government. Executive leadership, I think that's massive, right? If you don't have top level buy-in, you will really struggle to do this, and it becomes experimentation. So some great feedback there. I'll just see what the next one is. It's back to main presentation now. So I think Mentimeter's playing up again. It does go really glitchy every now and again. So I'll go back to the slides. So in terms of my experience, I'm a fellow of the APM, a chartered project professional and a chartered engineer. I've led some big jobs. So I was project manager on a 1 billion nuclear project with a team of 220, a program director on a portfolio of about 40 different projects, all sort of leading into a big program. And portfolio lead, I worked on a portfolio of ICT projects for the MOD as a consultant in there, leading a PMO, which was 10 billion. So that was satellites all the way through to sort of next generation of computers, etc. So in 2017, we founded the Project Data Analytics community. That's now grown to over 6,000 members. In 2018, we launched the first Project Hack, and we're now getting ready for the 7th, which I'll talk about a bit later. In 2019, we launched the first newsletter, and that's to keep people plugged into what's happening. And we've got some bots that scan the internet to try and find out the latest news on Project Data Analytics. In 2020, we started the Project Data Academy, which is this apprenticeship capability. And apprentices are not just for school leavers, it's now all about lifelong learning. In 2020, we launched the Construction Data Trust. We're also talking to the Oil and Gas Authority and the Oil and Gas Technology Centre about spinning one up for decommissioning programs in the North Sea as well. We'd like to spin them up in lots of different sectors. And we've also launched the Project Data Analytics Task Force, so we've been pushing that for a little while. So there's quite a few things we've been doing. I think it's massively exciting, right? This is really transformational stuff. So in terms of the overview, basically disruption is coming, right? You can't hold it back, it will change. I think it's all down to your engagement with it. In terms of advanced project data analytics and artificial intelligence, it is something that is happening today, and I'll show you that today. In terms of your roles, project delivery roles, they will be impacted, that's a certainty, and some will be reinvented. Business models are going to be disrupted as well. So the challenge for us is this a big threat and all our jobs are going to be taken over by robots? Or is this an opportunity where we can really pivot and start to do something fascinating and really disrupt the way we deliver projects? And if you think about a lot of project roles, they tend to be process focused. We do a lot of repetitive work like reporting and just process flows day in, day out. If we can get rid of that and then move the human intervention up the value chain, we do a lot better. So that's what we're trying to do. So what I'd like to go through in terms of next slides is first of all about the context, and to talk about this in terms of its inevitability, reimagining project delivery, and then preparation. So that's the general order of play. So the first one in terms of context. So if we look at projects, they're flatlined. So PMI survey from 2018, if we look at project performance, there's no overall trend there. You know, it's not really ramping up in the last 7 or 8 years or 9 years. You know, it's sort of pretty much flatlined. And if we look at productivity curves in some of the sectors that we work in, it's similar, right? It's quite flat. And there's a piece of work which was done by Alex Budzier, who works at Oxford University, and he studied 12,000 major projects. And from those 12,000 major projects, the probability of a project being delivered on time, on cost, and on benefits or better is 0.5%. So if you sign a business case and say that's what I'm going to get, your probability of getting it is 0.5%. And that for me was a shocker. And I felt the need to do something about it. So that's why I've been on this campaign ever since. And Alex Budzier is now part of the task force, and I'll talk about that later. So if you think about construction, I'll talk about construction because it's just contextual, right? This does apply to every sector. But in the last sort of 4 years or so, 5 years, share prices have plummeted in construction and have plummeted in some big engineering companies as well. So the likes of Babcock and Fleur, right, they do lots of different things, defence projects, industrials projects, right? They do lots of different things, and their share prices have been plummeting, and that's because these projects are failing. We're struggling to get the margin out of the projects, and some of them are fundamentally broken. So if we don't break the model in terms of the way that we're delivering projects at the moment, we're going to be in trouble, right? So some of these are going to go to the wall. So we need to think differently. If we think about financial turmoil as well, so we've got a massive deficit for this year, and it's building up. National debt is getting massive. And in terms of these economic models of those forecasts, then that's not accounting for a second wave, right, which is now with us. So we've got a moral and economic responsibility to transform project delivery performance. That cost growth, which we've experienced on Crossrail, that we've seen on things like Edinburgh Tram, that we're seeing on HS2, and lots of other projects, right? That is no longer acceptable. We've got to do something about it. As a country, we can't afford it. So I've talked about this being from construction, but it applies to pharma, it applies to defence, energy, petrochem, financial services, etc., etc. And one example of this is in terms of ICT projects. So this is a paper that was published by Alex Budzier and by Brent Fluvier back in 2011 or 12. And they're talking about this black swan blindness. And they're saying basically is that 1 in 6 projects is a black swan, and it's got a cost overrun of 200% or more and schedule delays of around 70%. Right, so that's from a sample of nearly 1,500 ICT projects. And if you think about the definition of a black swan, it's something that you didn't expect to arise, and it's unforeseeable, and you can only define it in retrospect. And a lot of these projects, so I've studied a lot of the lessons learned reports from these, are submitted FOI requests as well. I've looked through the NAO reports and the GAO reports as well. And it's not an unforeseeable event. It's unforeseeable if you've only worked on 3, 4, 5 projects in your life. If you've read a lot of these reports, then a lot of this is entirely foreseeable. So we're not using the data which exists in this overall ecosystem, so we can start to mitigate some of this. And some people out there are going to say, well, this is all old projects, so now in Agile, and that doesn't apply anymore, and every project's spot on. And I just sort of dispute that. I think we'll keep writing these reports and we'll find similar themes coming up all the time, but they will evolve. So in terms of this disruption is inevitable. So I'd like to talk about a role which is project controls, right? So project controls applies in lots of industries. You know, it might be industrials, it might be construction, it might be defence, etc. It applies to a certain extent in things like financial services as well. It's just a different language that goes with it. So project controls is normally about risk and cost and things like that. So you are the project manager's right-hand person who is controlling the project in terms of data. So if you do a project controls apprenticeship, it's a 3-year apprenticeship, proper old school. You get 3 years on the sort of tools, learning about risk, learning about schedules, learning about work breakdown structures, etc. Yet if you look at the definition of project controls, it says it's all about the data gathering, data management, and analytical processes to predict, understand, influence, etc. So we're teaching people about the function, but we're not tooling them up with the skills that they need, so we can start to predict what's going to go wrong. If we can predict what's going to go wrong, we move from this process-centric methods to something more based around decision science. And I think that's the really, really key thing, is focus on decision science. And if we can start to influence where your contingency is spent, decisions that you're making with suppliers, resourcing decisions, etc., that's when we start to become really effective project managers. And that's by digging into this massive data set and doing something with it. So if we think about reinventing project controls, Here's just some examples, and the construction-based examples, but there's similar things for other project environments as well, and I'll talk about that in my next slide. So there's a thing called build dots, and disperse do something similar as well. So you walk around the building site with a helmet on your camera, and it's scanning for you, and it provides a 3D model, and it's compared then against the BIM model, so the building information model, so basically a CAD model, and you can do an overlay, and you can find out the bits which are missing or the bits which have been built. So if it's been built, then you can feed that back to your schedule, and you know that that bit is now complete, so you can tick it off on your schedule. And if something is missing, you can say that now needs to be reorganized in your schedule, put some constraints around it. And basically, if it's done through artificial intelligence and machine learning, if you can code it in logic, then you can put it into your model. If it's more intuition based, it's a lot more difficult to do. So that's happening today. So these tools are available today, and it's happening. So what does that do for scheduling, and what does it do for your planners and that sort of thing? So this is a capability from Forecast, and Forecast we're going to come over and give a talk for us in March at our meetup, and abandoned at last minute when sort of lockdown happened. And they're doing some cool stuff. They got a load of money from round one funding, something like $5 million, something like that, and they've got a really cool capability. So they work in the agile space. Financial services, I think, is their main bag, but I think it applies to different sectors as well. And what they can do is they take your project, and they break it down, they look at your resources, and they can automatically schedule, automatically sort of resource load the project based upon the availability of those resources. If it knows as well in terms of what those resource costs are, then it can work up budgets, S-curves, all that sort of thing. It's doing that today. This is all available. It's all part of a commercial product. So if we can do this today, then what does this do to your project management job in the future? Question mark. So I think, you know, if we don't adapt to some of this, so this technology is coming out today, and some people have said to me, what we need to do, Martin, is we need to create this centralized data science team. And then they can work with all these project professionals, and the project professionals can crack on doing their job. They can reach back to the data scientist. If we do that, is that the same as a typing pool in terms of nobody can type? It's all done by a central typing pool. What we're doing, and what companies like Microsoft is trying to do, is to teach you to do things like app development, teach you to do dashboards, teach you to do artificial intelligence and automation and all that sort of stuff. If you can do it, and it's low code and it's pretty easy to learn, is not the same when the word processor arrived? And if that's the case, do you need this centralized team of data scientists who's just taking away bits of your job and just chipping away at your job in terms of the things you can do? Or is this reskilling you so you can do a different job in the future? And if you're moving towards a more sort of predictive capability, it's down to the project professionals basically to get those insights and to start to use that to influence what you're going to do. So in terms of opportunities, there are a vast array of opportunities. So just talk about some of them. So this is white space, basically. There's some people in some of these areas, but most of it is just white space. So if we think about risk, if we've got a data set of, say, 10,000 projects, we can then calculate what the risks are per work package or phase. It's not going to be spot on because the world's always changing. There'll be COVID, there'll be all sorts of things in there, but it's a very good approximation. What we've also got is the statistical probability and impact of those risks, because it's come from all of that data set. So instead of sat there thinking, no, I think it's a medium and somebody's arguing it's a high, you've got the data now. So you've got a baseline from which to iterate from. And you can go back, you can interrogate that data as well. You can look for its relevance and understand its context compared to your situation. And that's the basis of discussion. Once again, it's augmented risk management. It's not taking it away from you. And once you start to get a situation that a computer told me to do something, the human being becomes dumb, and we're not taking in this insight and intuition where we need to be. There's snowballing in there. There's risk vectors as well. So which part of a project does your risk start to move very, very quickly? If you know that, you can become alert to it. You can start to look out for it. And that might be more regular meetings with your client and your suppliers. It might be putting out a survey. It might be sending somebody out to have a chat with somebody about something. So it's all down to these risk windows as well. If you can look at the mitigations that worked before and the things that didn't, then you can start to do something about that as well. So your schedule, so especially in the agile space, if you start to understand from your schedule what the time was to achieve something and what the logic is and what the nesting is in some of those components of the work breakdown structure, then you can start to use those in future agile sprints, because you know if you want to write a piece of code for a certain thing, it's got so many story points with it, it's got so many user stories and these types of user stories, etc., then you can start to do that. And that's where forecast is going. Same for cost. In terms of quality, you can look at compliance to process. So if you've got a load of processes in your organization, then you can use data science and project data analytics to assess people's compliance to that process. And if you've got suppliers as well, you can assess that. So some of those lead indicators, if they're doing things and that start to compromise quality, you start to know about it. If you've got known areas of concern on a project because it's things that tend to go badly wrong, then you can look out for them. So you can now start to sense for it and start to do something about it. Safety, you know, that's more about construction, but resourcing and teams, optimal team roles, resourcing as well, based upon all the projects that's been before, bottlenecks, critical resources. There's a chap in Australia called Kelvin McGrath who's doing some really cool work on team dynamics and leadership style as well versus performance. And what Kelvin's saying is, in terms of the surveys that he's run, it's a 45-second survey that he runs on an app, and from that survey now he's detecting if a team is getting burnt out, if you've got a differential between what the project team's thinking and what the leadership team's thinking, because there's then a load of bias in it and you're setting yourself up for failure. There's various things and various insights which you can get through those sort of apps and those sort of insights. Benefits and outcomes as well, so we can start to understand if there's a benefit shortfall in your plan from the outset, so you're predisposed to shortfall. Some of these IT projects, some business transformation projects, you tend to shortfall on them. And if that's the case, you've got a choice. Do you go back and recraft the business case and make it more realistic, or do you go back and address that predisposition and try and fix it? So there's all of that sort of stuff. The volume of change as well. So if we look at the volume of change, which change starts to snowball, and do you get yourself into a vicious circle of change which costs you a load of money? Which of those work packages are more predisposed to change, predictability of change? Commercial as well, where you tend to be exposed to claims. If there's a predisposition to that, if you've got certain suppliers who are more litigant than other suppliers, problematic terms and conditions, so you can now start to evidence it, etc. So there is so much to go for in this space, and it's a phenomenal opportunity for all of us. So I'd like to touch on a role now, which is a risk manager. So I've had lots of risk managers sort of working with me over the years. And people say, well, they manage risk. And from my experience on the projects I've worked on, they don't manage risk. They come along and tell me once a week that my risk register needs to be updated. They tell me what's in the red box, what's in the amber box, and what's in the green box. And they're advising me where the risks are well articulated and where they're not well articulated. So it's more of a process job from my sort of perspective. I'm sure there's risk managers out there would fundamentally disagree. But where we need to move this to in the future is to let the machine manage the process. So it can do all the nagging, you've not updated this, you've not updated that. It can also do a quality review in terms of the quality of the risk that you're putting in. It can tell you the sort of risk that you'd expect to see in a package of work or in a phase of a project. It can tell you the probabilities, etc. So it's a different sort of job to the job that we've currently got. And if I could choose somebody today, I would want a domain expert who understands my business. I'd want a risk manager who understands about risk and the emergence of risk. And I'd like to package that with a fundamental understanding of data science and data analytics. And that for me would be the perfect person to be doing this job. It's not then risk management anymore. It's more about sort of influencing decision making and decision science. So where do you spend your contingency and things like that? And I'll give you some examples now from some other industries. So there's a company called Bride and Wood, and I follow them around on the conference circuit, or used to back in the real world. And a chap called Jamie Johnston's doing some great work on motorways, and he's done it on flats, and he's done it on schools, etc. And he said, basically, if you can design something through logic, and with a motorway, you know that the gantries need to be at certain intervals, you know that the signage needs to be a mile before the junction, you know this, you know that, you know something else. So if it's all codable in logic, then you should be able to design something based around all of that logic. So he took that challenge on and he solved it. And he can now design a motorway using logic and through machine learning, etc. And he's done it, and he's now open sourced that model and he's given it away. He's done exactly the same for schools. So he said, if you want a school for 1,000 people, what's your average classroom size? You press a button and it will give you a layout of a school based around a footprint. And it knows to put the broom cupboards in the middle, and it knows to put the classrooms close to the windows, etc. It knows you need so many toilets per people, etc. So it lays it all out. And if you don't like that, and you say, I don't like the classroom layout because they're too small or they're the wrong size, whatever, you can go in, change that parameter, and it'll run another 1,000 permutations of it. So instead of giving this to an architect and they go away and redesign it, you can do it in minutes just by pressing a button and spinning those iterations through. So it's starting to disrupt architecture. So if we're doing that in one area, then can we do it in project delivery? So can we get to the point where we can automate project delivery? And we're getting pretty close to it, right? I don't think we've got the data in place, we've not got the use case in place yet, but the technology is starting to come together. Next thing that Bride and Wood's been pushing as well is this kit of parts. So a kit of parts is basically saying, instead of a building bespoke every time, if you know that a classroom needs to be 40 feet by 30 feet, you know what the spans are, so you know what the steels need to be, it's all pre-designed, so you've got a kit of parts. So you can turn up with an IKEA kit and just go and assemble it. You put the red bolt in the red hole and the blue bolt in the blue hole. And that means you can de-skill the job and you can get a lot more people into construction and the prices all drop. So he's driving the cost out of construction and he's turning it into more of a manufacturing process. So if we're doing that with a kit of parts, does that start to change the way that project management works? Because if it all now turns up on the back of a lorry, you got a lorry coming every day with a different kit of parts, what's the project manager going to do if it's all just in time, right? So it's not just a kit of parts. We've got refurbs, we've got brownfield sites, we've got one-off, we've got logistics, stakeholder management, all that sort of stuff. But it will start to transform project delivery. So this is coming, this is real. There's lots of pilots going on kits of parts at the moment. So it's called design for manufacture and assembly. And there's offsite manufacture as well. So this is coming, guys. This is with us today. Our next thing is with N-Plan. So N-Plan's given 3 years worth of talks now at our community. So they started with us in 2018, they came back in 2019 and again in 2020. And they just landed a contract a few weeks ago, or it's been announced recently, working with Network Rail. So Network Rail have got a massive amount of data. And if you've got a massive amount of data, you can run the analytics on it. And N-Plan's got about 20 people. It's got a lot of investment money as well. And they do some pretty top-end PhD level data analytics, looking at those schedules. And now they can predict delay and predict outcomes on that project, and milestones and things like that, better than a human being can do it. And they've validated that. So they've now got a contract to roll that out on some other projects. So that's pretty groundbreaking, pretty cool, you know, and it's happening today. And the challenge is, so Network Rail, they've got a huge amount of data, but in your company, Basically, if you've got the volume of data, you need to be able to do this. And if not, then you need to work together so you can aggregate the data and you can do something with it. And it's coming
Martin,
like, yeah.
Sorry to jump in. We've got a few questions. I don't know whether you want to field them at
Yeah,
the end or.
No, pick them up now if you want. Yeah.
All right, I'll read it out. It's Amanda Mesluk. I hope I said your name correctly there, Amanda. Apologies if not. She's asking, are we seeing any models to control environmental performance of a project? And then she says, monitor and decrease project GHG emissions applied to construction, case reducing emissions from construction projects.
So there is a company called Qualis Flow, right? So there's a lady who gave a talk for us about 3 or 4 months ago. Name escapes me. Come to me in a minute. So Qualis Flow are starting to get into sustainability, right? So they're starting to look at the waste that's coming out of a project. They're looking at greenhouse gases, net zero, that sort of stuff. So they've got some artificial intelligence there as well. It's part of the same group that spun out N-Plan as well. So there's something called Entrepreneurs First, and they invest in bright young things. They go and find your investment money, and they get you going, and then they spin all these business out. So it's one of those companies called Qualis Flow. So they're doing it. I know they're doing it. There's other people in this space as well. I'm not quite sure they're doing exactly the same as what Qualis Flow is doing, but theirs is pretty cool tech. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's machine learning. It's trying to look and predict the waste that's going to come out of a project so you can intervene and make it better and optimize, basically. So I don't know if that answers the question, Awesome.
Yeah, no, that was good. I'll feed that back into the chat as well. And then she followed on, are project managers looking to have a clear understanding of the activities which lead to more carbon emissions? I think you kind of touched on that as well, I suppose, didn't you?
So there's a big push towards net zero, right? So I went to a construction conference just before lockdown, and it was like the week before lockdown, and there was a massive focus on net zero. And I know in construction that they're really focused on it. It's becoming part of their bids, so they've been asked about it. And in terms of companies, I think there's some who's a lot more advanced than other companies, and they're really starting to take it seriously. But I think this year, you know, it's a turning point. It's starting to happen now. Yeah.
And there's just one more, I'll just read that out. With regard to, this is from James Best, by the way, with regard to automating project delivery, where does one get the data from if it's not collected internally, and how does automating project delivery deal with emerging factors?
So there are different things, right? So automation, so you can start off with automation very, very easily. So if you do something that has got a repetitive nature to it, so you cut and paste in between two screens, namely, right? You can buy a bot that's going to fix that today, right? So you don't need to do that anymore. If you put some Python code in there, then you can do clever and cleverer things. So in BIM, for instance, right? So there's a thing called a BIM file naming convention. So it's somebody's job every time a file arrives, and it might be, for instance, from the electrician to say this is where all the sockets need to go, and then you get another file that comes in from the engineering, and it tells you where the heating and the electrical installations need to go, right? All these other things. These files are coming in one by one. All of them need to be integrated together. So it's somebody's job to put the file names on that. And there's a standard with that. So there's a code, there's a convention to all the standards. So because it's logic based and it's a standard, if you can read the standard and you understand what's coming in, then you can automate it. And we did exactly that in about a week using a commercial tool called UiPath. And it's basically a bot. You buy the bot for 7 days a week, and you can run it 24 hours a day, and it does different things. So it'll do multiple shifts during the week doing all these different things. So that's automation of projects. So moving towards automated project delivery means that we can start to do things like automatically schedule, we can understand risk better, we can do automated cost plans, etc. I don't think it's ever going to be fully automated, I think it needs to be augmented because it needs human judgment in there. So you need to take account of COVID. You need to take about environmental conditions, you know, whether there's been a problem with supplier, all those sort of things. So you still need to go in and tweak it, but it should be able to do more and more for you in the future. In terms of where you get the data from, it's not just data, it's making sure that you're answering the right use cases. So there's a lot of data out there that I see that is not fit for purpose because it's the data from a form that we filled in 20 years ago, right? So you used to fill in a form and somebody's digitized the form and you're still filling the form. You've lost track of why you actually want to fill that in. And that's a big problem at the moment with some of the data we've got. It's not solving the problems that we're trying to answer in the future. So as a project manager, I want to know what's going to go wrong in the next 3 months. I don't see data today that is going to answer that question. So it's a great challenge. And I think we need to go back and really ask the question, what do we need this data for? And start to amass it in things like data trust, and then we can drive that forward. Any more, Sim? Right.
Yeah, no, that was great. So what else have we got? Yeah, they seem to be coming in thick and fast. So let's see. This one is from William Hooper. AI is critically dependent on the availability of data sets. As you described Network Rail, have you heard of any significant data sets in IT projects?
So I think these data sets definitely exist, right? So I know in banks, for instance, they've got massive data sets. So there's a company called Modano who spun off Shark Tower. So Shark Tower is a capability, and they're giving a talk at our meetup next week. So they've got a lot of data. So data exists, but it's all siloed. It's all in little compartments. So we need to get hold of it through something like a data trust. And I think that's part of the problem at the moment, is that nobody's got the volume of data to be able to do this clever stuff. So it's all sat in different organizations and different part of the organizations who don't talk to each other. So we're trying to fix that. Any more, Sim?
No, I think we're good for now. Thank you so much for covering those. Yeah,
my pleasure. My pleasure. Right, I'll crack on. I've got quite a few more slides. So we talked about this, right? So this was this thing about file naming conventions. So Balfour Beatty wrote to government with a proposal to do a load of clever stuff in building information modeling, and said we can automate this. And their vision was to develop a tool that they could then use and potentially sell. All right. So they got sort of worked up a £900,000 project to do solve that problem. And the first part of that, we just addressed it with commercial off-the-shelf tools, and we solved it in a week for nothing, right? So if you start to become a vendor in this space, it's about developing your own capabilities. If you're not a vendor, then you can use whatever's best in class and start to solve the problem really, really cheaply, right? So as I say, if we can solve this in just 1 week, you know, just imagine what we can do if we really start to put a shoulder behind it. So in terms of reimagined project delivery, and this is quite scary, I think, what's coming up, right? So Blockbuster and Kodak, right? So Blockbuster saw it come in. So their chief executive at the time said, right, we need to invest in it. So we started to invest in it. The franchisees didn't like it. The investors didn't like it. So they moved him on. And somebody else came along and they reverted the strategy back. And 3 years later, it went bankrupt. So they saw this thing coming and didn't react to it. And Kodak invented the digital camera and didn't really leverage it. So we're in a blockbuster moment for some organizations. So if you think about day rate consultants at the moment, right, it's all based around expertise and knowledge. And the more experience you've got, the more expertise you've got, the more you get paid. Knowledge is power. Knowledge creates revenue. And basically, automation equals less days. So if you don't break that model, then these companies are just in a spiral of doom, because you'll get less and less bums on seats and less hourly rates, unless you change the model to more of a insights-based role. So if it's an insights-based business, you start to use this automation to improve efficiency and repeatability. You start to predict variance. you start to do things like target these interventions. So it needs a different commercial model. So on one, you're based on your knowledge and experience, and the other one is your ability to provide some insights, effective insights. And I see at the moment is that some organizations can't invest in this because they've got to keep their bums on the seat, selling them out, etc. And they can't train them up to do this new stuff because they're out doing the old stuff. So I think we're at a tipping point and it's coming soon. And I think we will start to see some of these cash cow businesses start to suffer. So in terms of the client role, so there's a picture there about Crossrail, and they came to our meetup in 2018, August 2018, and presented this slide. And all the data in red goes to Rail for London, and they use that for the railway to maintain the railway, and all the stuff in blue is a big exhaust plume that comes out the back. So if you're a client, and there's an organization called TIES, which is part of DFT, and TIES is saying, let's start to pull some of this data. Right, so what they're trying to do is to pull a lot of the client data together. And if you got client data from every single highways project, every single rails project, every single school project, hospital project, etc., then can you use that data then from one project to the next project to the next project so you can drive efficiency? If that's the case, do you start to transform procurement strategies, because you're no longer buying on the basis of the most economically advantageous tender. You're now buying on the basis of your ability to extract value from that data and to drive up productivity. So it's a different sort of thing. So in terms of this bespoke ecosystem, so you've got things like the A14 project, which is around Cambridge. So a load of companies came together as a JV. They spun the business up. They set up their own infrastructure. They deliver the road, and then they'll close it down, and then they'll spin something else up for the A303. And they start to say, well, that's not very clever because we've got a load of insights in that data and we can use that for next time. I think there's a challenge back to government, which is, in terms of those insights, some of that is intellectual property, it's your commercial edge, and you can't just give it away to somebody else. So all of that needs working out, and I think the government's not quite found its way through that yet. So we think about highway, schools and hospitals and these decommissioning projects in the North Sea. There's £50 billion worth of decommissioning liability in the North Sea. So all those rigs that are out there that need to be decommissioned, 50 billion. So that's a liability basically. So once they start to work together and they look at the schedule, logic, durations, predisposition to variance, risks, impact of weather, etc. If you can pool all that data for that 50 billion, then you can really start to drive down cost, right? So if you can do that and you're rolling this from one project to next project to next project, then that's where you get the insights. Similar sort of things apply for ICT upgrades, service improvements, transformation projects, workforce planning, etc. So like I say, will these projects be won by those who work collegiately in the long-term interest of the client? So it's making sure you're driving this productivity. So it's those people who's making sure that the next project is better than the last project. And you think the way we do it at the moment, you build a hospital and that's given to contractor A. There's another competition for the next hospital and that's given to contractor B. There's no read across from one to the next. And they start again, basically. All right, so it's a bespoke process. So we need to fix some of that. So what's driving this as well? So government's looking at this through government's lens, and it's saying, so what we need to do is pull all this client data. It's my data, you can't see it. And it's not their data, right? They are custodians of the data on behalf of us, the public and the taxpayer. And there's a national data strategy which was published back in September. And that national data strategy is saying, basically, we need to make this data available. And government's not seeing that yet. So at department level, they're not seeing it. It's a ministerial level, they're saying that there's a load of value in this data which we need to get out there for the benefit of everybody. So there's a challenge to be had, and I'm seeing tension on this day in, day out, and I'm still fighting the battle, right? So in my view, this is a national asset. So all this project data is a national asset that we should all work together on and extract our insights on for the greater good of society and the profession. It's not government's data where they hold it back for departmental reasons. That is changing, and this strategy is saying that. So what we did, we went to court, we put loads of FOI requests in trying to get hold of some of this data, and we couldn't get it. The department said if we give you it, then the contract will fall apart and we'll get sued and this will happen and that will happen. And it's not the case. It's just a lot of the time a government is trying to protect its data because it doesn't want the hassle of releasing it. There's reputational damage in there, etc. They're accountable to the public for the delivery of these projects. So I went through the appeals process. I took it to the ICO. The ICO ruled against me, and it went to court. I went to Basingstoke Crown Court. I was in court, and we won. So we beat government in terms of being able to get hold of some of this project data, right? So the pendulum is now swinging. So that's back in 2019, a pre-national data strategy. And now we have got the national data strategy. This pendulum is properly swinging, right? So it's in our favour now to get hold of this data. I'm not saying we should be a terrorist and put every single bit of data out there, because I don't think that is correct. There's some of it which is commercially sensitive, but there's ways of managing that commercially sensitivity through things like differentiated privacy and distributed learning and various other methods as well. So there's ways we can manage it. It doesn't mean it's all got to be locked away in a cupboard somewhere. So it's a brand new era which is starting, and I'm saying to government, we've got to wake up to this. So back in 2017, government said we're going to work on all these data trusts. We've put in 4 sort of innovation proposals into government, and they told us it was too big, too bold, and undeliverable. So what we did is I've been working with quite a few construction companies, and we've spun one up. So we've now got a construction data trust going. We've got Microsoft on board as well. They've given us some services. So what we're trying to do with a data trust is to pool this data for the collective interest. So it's not owned by anybody. If it's your data, it's your data, so it's owned by you. The data trust is just it's a platform basically which hosts your data. You are a member of the data trust, and you can sort of have a right of veto on who's using your data and for what purpose. But it means we can start to pull together data in one place. We put the appropriate controls on it. A researcher might get full access, a competitor might get limited access. I can only see aggregated data, etc. So we got all these data pipelines. We can then understand data quality, feed it back and say your data quality is benchmarked and it's not as good as it should be. So that gives a business case to change. We can also work together on use cases, make sure we've got the right use cases and the data model is supporting those use cases. We work collegiately to move the UK forward. Now, this country is going to be pretty skint soon, and we've got Brexit on top of that. We've got to work better, and we've got to change this project management performance issue. This is the best way of doing it. I see government at the moment is trying to sabotage some of this stuff, and it's working on things like a client-based data store, and it's going to be moving towards pulling more and more sort of data from its supply base, which will damage trust. So we think this construction data trust approach, working with Open Data Institute, founded by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, is the way to go, and we're absolutely convinced with it. So it's a critical step forward. So it's not just pooling loads of data into a big data store somewhere. You know, it's not a big filing cabinet. Basically, in terms of the value of this data, it needs to be connected data. And if you don't connect it, you can't run the complex queries. You can't really do the clever artificial intelligence and machine learning stuff. So we need to do a lot more than just using it as a dustbin to put a lot of data in. It all needs to be joined together. So if we've not got the right data today, then we can't answer the questions which we need to answer. So we need to look at the ontology, so the connections between different data sets. So if we ask the question, what's likely to go wrong next week, we look at the risks, the issues which are dynamic. So we're not just looking at those in a static sense. We need to see the evolution of those over time, delivery maturity, team dynamics, etc., etc., etc. So we need to look at the use cases, data models, taxonomies, and start to join them together. And if we've not got the data at the moment to answer those use cases, then we need to do a gap analysis and solve it through a data pipeline. And once we've solved it with a data pipeline, then we can all work together to fix it. So if we talk about predisposition, as a human being, we're all predisposed to some illnesses. And some of that is lifestyle based. And if you don't go running and eat a lot of cake, you're probably going to have a heart attack. If you've got the wrong sort of DNA, then you're probably going to get a certain sort of cancer. So we know that because the data tells us that. We don't know it with projects, right? We know it at top level. So there's another piece of work that was done by Oxford University that they know that if you're on a solar powered project, it's not predisposed to much variance. If you're on a nuclear power project, it's predisposed to massive variance. So that tells us at a project level, but it doesn't tell us what we can do about it. So what we need to know is that some work packages are predisposed to variance, some suppliers are, some clients are, and some functions are, etc. If we start to understand the predisposition and a forensic understanding of this predisposition, that's when we can start to transform project delivery. What we're also trying to do is democratize some of these solutions as well. So every organization at the moment is working individually. It's all working up its own dashboards, its own data models, ontologies, apps, data pipelines, machine learning models, etc. And a lot of that is just basic stuff, and we're spending millions and millions of pounds just replicating stuff. And there's no commercial value in it because a lot of it takes you a week or two to do it. So we're better off giving it away. And if we give it away and all work collegiately, we'll move a lot quicker. We'll have a standard set of ontology and taxonomy, so we'll all start to share data a lot better and pool this data for the greater good. And we'll move a lot quicker into this advanced data analytics future where we can use artificial intelligence. So that's our vision, and I'm leading this work stream with a chap called Alex Robertson from Petrify, and I'll talk about that in a minute. End plans, sort of been looking at procurement strategies as well. It talks about bidding for realism. So it said when you put a bid in, the client's asking you to do something, so you say, yeah, I can do it on that certain date, and you bid it, and you know from your data set, the client's asking you for a certain date, and what your data is telling you is that you just can't do it on that date, right? So you've got a bad incentive right from day one. So you've got misaligned objectives between the client and the supplier. So you're setting yourself up for litigation right from day one. And the supplier then is just working back and is working, what's the best way to get one over on the client so I can recover and I'm not going to be penalized as much through litigation. So you're setting it up badly from the start. So if we can work together on these machine learning models, then we can understand what is the 50% confidence point in a schedule. Everybody's agreed on it because that's what the data set's telling us. And you can have a different contract then to incentivize people to bring that date in or bring the cost in. We've done things like disrupting the bidding process as well. So Projected Success have done some sort of bid analytics where we can look across frameworks and we can see that one client is scoring 50% and another client is scoring 90% on health and safety or business resilience and continuity. And a lot of this in bids is just a boilerplate information. So there should be consistency in terms of bidding. We can demonstrate that is not the case. And if we can start to use data science, we can bring consistency. We take away the lottery component. We can incentivize some of these clients as well to think differently about the way they bid. So you can bring in more sort of SMEs. And that second picture down there, it shows that the big companies are consistently getting high scores and they're very consistent in terms of their bids. The smaller companies are consistently inconsistent, which means that they're wasting a lot of the money bidding. So if you want to bring in SMEs, we've got to change the procurement process, and that is evidence of the fact, and government aren't really responding to that evidence yet, and I think we need to encourage that. I'm not government bashing, by the way. I was in government myself for 20 years. I worked in MOD and NATO and things like that. It's more about a government has just got so much data that we can all work together to really drive this forward. And we talk about knowledge management as well, and we say, well, it's all down to people's experience, this, and we can't write it all down because it's tacit knowledge. And and you can only write down the explicit knowledge, and that's not the case anymore, right? So where that line is drawn between explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge is starting to change, because all this know-how, tips and tricks, best practice, intuition, right? So that intuition starts to come out of your data. So it starts to capture assumptions, dependencies, expertise, correlation and causality, right? So it starts to drive heuristics as well. If we've got that, where that waterline is at the moment, it starts to drop. And once it starts to drop, we change the balance of this. So we need to challenge established thinking about knowledge management and valuing this experience. And experience is still valuable, but it comes with bias. And some of that bias can be very costly, especially if you've got a gung-ho project manager who says, no, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. And the data's telling you not. And that needs to temper some of this experience. So I think this is where we're going in the future. So the next thing is in terms of what's the impacts on insurance, right? So if you want to insure a project, and you've got insurance premiums at the moment, if the insurer's got a lot of this data, then what's that going to do for insurance premiums? And can you drive down insurance premiums now because you can demonstrate that the risk is lower than the perceived risk? And if you're a project professional and you're ignoring this data, then what does that do for your professional liability? So if you're making decisions and disregarding the data and you're being gung-ho, then does that mean that you are now criminally and professionally liable for those decisions? We've never really faced that in project delivery before. So I'm a chartered engineer and a chartered project professional. If I make a reckless engineering decision, I go to jail. If I make a reckless project management decision, it's very difficult to track it because you can say it's a system problem, you can argue it away. That's not going to be the case in the future because you can do it forensically. So back to Mentimeter if we can. We'll just have a quick whiz through Mentimeter. So let me get this back again, see if the glitch has gone. So in terms of your business, so do you think it's a minor shift? Is it normal evolution, a significant shift, or do you think it's a potential blockbuster and Kodak moment for your organization? So there's 3 people who think it's still normal evolution, 9 who think it's significant shift, and just 1 person who think it's a blockbuster moment. Well, that's fascinating as well. In construction, it was much more about the blockbuster moment, a significant shift. Right, that's fascinating, and I'd love to understand why. What your rationale is for that. So in terms of the preparedness of your organization, do you really understand the potential of this disruption? Are you actively exploring sort of initiatives to adapt? You've got things in place all the moment, and you've got a clear strategy and plan as well. So if you've got a clear strategy and plan, you're making this happen, it's all funded, you've got a load of cash behind it, and you know where you're going. So it takes a bit of time sometimes for Mentimeter to react. So this thing at the back as well, it shows us the distribution of scores as well, which is quite helpful. So there's 1 person out there who seems to be pretty good, and nobody's really got a clear strategy and plan in place. There's someone's got the emergence of a strategy and a plan, but overall, you tend to be strongly disagreeing. So that's quite interesting as well. It shows us that we're not ready for this yet because we haven't got the plans in place, we haven't got the strategies in place. We're still not making it happen. And I think, that's why I go and do all these roadshows with people, is try and get them ready for this, because it is coming. And in terms of driving the strategy and the plan, there's a lot we can be doing now. So there's only 17 votes there. So if other people can get on Mentimeter, I'll be very grateful. There's 62 of you out there at the moment. So we've only got about a quarter of you voting and interacting. So if you just get your phones out and just participate, it just makes it a bit more fun for everybody. I'll just whiz through these bits as well. No, I shall go back. So back to my slides again. I'll drag this out of the way.
We've got a couple more questions if you want to do that while everybody's doing the Mentimeter.
Yes, please go for it. So,
Yeah, so John Ryan, so it's a double part question, I suppose. How often is project management really appointed too late and becomes damage limitation? And then should project/risk management start in the project bidding process?
So I think that project management is often late to the party. And the problem is, do you understand if you're picking up a basket case or not, right? And I've had some problems that's been some projects have been really problematic, and you can sniff them out, you know, from experience. If you've been around a bit, you can sniff them out, but it's very difficult to evidence it. So you've got to go with your gut feel, and you can't get loads more money, or you can't go and do a massive reschedule based around a gut feel, because people won't accept it. So we need the data that goes with it. So what's the other part of that question? Sorry, Yasim, I've forgotten now.
So should project risk management start in the bidding process early on?
Yeah, so if you're bidding a project, right, it should include a risk budget in there. So that's your contingency. So if you're the client, then you need to work out, you know, what's likely to go wrong and what contingency you need on top of the costs, the baseline cost of doing something. And you keep that back. And if you want to give that to your supplier, then you can draw it down through certain agreements. It might be gain share, it might be whatever. If you're the sort of bidding organization, you need to be working out that risk, because that is what is going to make your margin. So if you manage that risk properly, you spin that into margin, and that's what makes you profit. So if you're really effective at risk management, basically that's where you make your money. Okay, Sim, any more?
Yeah, no, great answer. So the next one is from James Best. He says, what main causes of major projects, what are the main causes of projects overrun, overspend, or failure will be affected by utilizing data analytics? And are there any case studies or models demonstrating as such?
So, right, I've studied 20,000 lessons learned. I probably spent best part of a year of my life just studying all of this, and I thought I could apply data science to all of these things about lessons learned. And there's loads of reports out there. So the APM published something about the 12 conditions of project success. The IPA just talked about 8 conditions of project success or something, and then somebody else will talk about, you know, 16 causes of project failure, and the NAO's done it. The Government Accountability Office in the States have done it. People in Australia's done it. Right? There's loads and loads of these reports of lots of reasons for project failure, and they've been the same for the last 40 years, roundabout. Right? Slightly different words, but very similar themes. And just writing them down with different words is a waste of time. You don't change anything. So if we know that, and we know the reasons of project failure, why do we keep making the same mistakes? And this chap in Canada in 1997 asked exactly that question. And he said, if we know the reasons of project failure, why do we keep making the same mistakes? And it's because you're running at 100 miles an hour in a lot of the case. There's a lot of decisions being made and they don't understand all the facts. There's politics involved, etc. So we know the reasons of project failure, and keep studying that. And more people doing more research on it is a complete waste of money, right? We've done it to death. What we should be looking at, and I give an analogy, if you're driving a sort of rally car as fast as you can down the road, and you're the project manager, you're looking at the road in front of you, and you're trying to work out what's going to go wrong next. Your co-pilot is telling you is that the next bit of road is really dangerous. Somebody spun off there and killed himself. You know, there's the crowd jumped out and made them all swerve, and they lost like 15 seconds on that bit of track or whatever. That's what data science is going to be telling us. It's based upon the conditionality of the project. It's not some abstraction that sits at a very top level telling you what might have gone wrong or might go wrong. As a general sort of problem, you want to know what speed should you be going at around the corner. Yeah, and if you exceed that speed, you're probably going to kill yourself. That's what you want to know with a project, right? It's conditionality based insights. Now, can we demonstrate that today? I think Network Rail is starting to demonstrate that. So it's demonstrating, instead of doing this lessons learned process, it's starting to think differently about it. Now, it's a pathfinder. It's just starting this process. I think it's a long way from concluding it. Because what we need to be doing in the future is narrating this variance. So if you've got a plan and you do better or you do worse than the plan, if you narrate it, and when we learn from machine learning, you don't just get a number, you get an explanation that goes with it, and the data scientist or the data analyst can then go in and understand the context and bring it to life. So you can work with the project manager then to put some explanation around it. Otherwise, it's just a black box algorithm, and black box algorithms are very difficult to influence somebody, because they say, well, I don't believe the computer. I've got 30 years of experience. I know best. So that's a long answer. Is that okay?
No, that was more than okay. Yeah, my I'm trying to type away and field. I'm trying to field the answers in the chat as we go along, because I think, you know, it loses something if it's done afterwards. But yeah, my fingers are red hot after that one. So we've got Simon Wallace. I hope you're okay with the questions still coming in. I know you've got a few more bits probably, but let's just go on.
Yeah, go for it.
So Simon Wallace is saying change programs usually have many software aspects that are less amenable to quantification than things like software development and infrastructure. For example, understanding the change, staff behaviors, skill levels, morale, customer perception, take-up, knowledge, reputation. Should we try to quantify, collect, and analyze performance in those aspects as well as the harder components?
So that's what Kelvin McGraw's doing. So his company is called Meeting Quality. So if you go to Projecting Success YouTube and try and find Kelvin's talk on there, pretty cool. So he's doing this today. So he's looking at all the human components of it. And he's saying, you know, if you look at morale, so what he said is morale drops and drops and drops, and then it suddenly gets really good, right? And when it gets really good, it means you've burnt the team out and they've given up, and they accept now the project's broken, it's never going to be delivered on time, they're all going to get sacked or something. So they all start to think, well, there's nothing else I can do. So there's indicators in there which are lead indicators that the project is going to go very pear-shaped, right? And that's not through schedules or anything like that. That's just from groupthink. So if you can plug into groupthink, then you get the wisdom of the crowd, and I think that's fascinating. So it's not just about project controls, it's about the human aspects of it. I think we're right at the start of this journey. I think there's a lot more to come.
Okay, no, thank you. Kelvin McGrath, did you say?
McGrath.
Okay, ATH, right. Okay, brilliant. So they can just YouTube that and Google that and find the talk that you mentioned.
Yeah. He's a good bloke, actually. He came to see us in London a couple of years ago, and he gave a talk for us January, February time, I think it was, maybe a bit later. It's around then, that sort of time.
Okay, brilliant. And just one more question at the moment. How data science analytics will fit into agile projects? That's from Prasanna Menon.
So look at what forecasts doing, right? So forecasts are all over this, right? And for me, if you look at an agile project and you're looking at it, it's like a ship that's, or a boat, should I say? It's like a boat tacking somewhere, right? So you try something in your first sprint, and you do your next sprint, you do your next sprint, your next sprint, your next sprint, your next sprint, your next sprint. If you look back at that journey, it's not a straight line. So if you can learn from that, the next time round, you can make it a straighter line, then you can do it more efficiently. So if you're doing website development, or you're doing just rolling code out, app development, or whatever, there's some commonality in that approach. And there's a company called Scope Master out there who's been trying to do this, and there's various companies who's looking into this space, and I mentioned Shark Tower as well, so they're doing stuff in this space. So there's some companies on it, and I think you need to just go and play around with some of their tools. Some of them are free as well for a little while, so you get a free month or something. So just have a play about with them, see what you think.
Right, brilliant. No, thank you very much. And Hannah Martin, thank you for sharing a link to, I think, the YouTube clip we were talking about.
Great, great, thank you very much. Right, I should crack on.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So, in terms of your views about what's going to change, etc., this is the view from the Project Data Analytics panel session that we ran. So this was chaired by Sue Kershaw, who's the president of the APM. So we had about 100 and something people on the call. 68 people voted, and it's a very different sort of score. About, in fact, the next slide gives it away a bit better, I think. It's about the impacts on projects, right? So this is about project controls, but we talked about projects more generally as well. And there was one person who thought there's no impact. 5 thinks it's a minor tweak. I think it's a major change, very different role. And there's about a quarter of people who think that basically if they don't keep up, they're not going to become obsolete. So for each of these talks I sort of give, that there's a massive distribution in terms of perception. And I think that's linked to your knowledge about what the impact's going to have. And once you start to understand more and more and more about it, then you understand, it's going to impact some roles a lot more than other roles. And it's working out personally, is it going to affect your livelihood and your mortgage and all that sort of stuff? If it is, now's the time to adapt and to become part of these pathfinders and be on the front foot on this, not somebody nibbling away at your job, taking bits of it. So in terms of being able to prepare, we've got this task force. So if you go to pdataskforce.com and look in the resourcing section, you'll see a white paper in there. So there's 12 of us that's come together from government, from BAE Systems, Heathrow Airport, Petrofac, the Office for National Statistics Census Programme, so there's an IT project in there as well. All right. And we've got these 6 work streams here about engagement, data access, making sure we can move towards data trust or similar things, driving up data quality, open sourcing solutions. We're looking at skills and make sure that we're equipped for this, and we know what this role looks like in the future. So what do you need to do as an organization to make sure you understand this future landscape? And the last is research. And so you need a strategy as well that goes with. So you need to work out your portfolio and project data strategy. So it's not just looking at your data strategy about GDPR and that sort of stuff. It's looking at your data strategy in terms of your ambitions for where you want to be in this space. What skills do you need? What's your top level roadmap? Where do you need to be by when? And what's your blueprint? So your as is today, your to be, etc. And it's not just about you, because if you spend a lot of money with a supply chain, you can be fantastic at data science and you're blind to 70% of your data because it's in your supply chain, and that's no use to man the ornament, really. So you really need to be driving this forward end to end in terms of the data pipeline. The next thing is in terms of upskilling. So we're trying to create these pie-shaped people. It's a person with a broad understanding of the business, got one leg in project delivery and one leg in data analytics. If you've just got a data scientist in here, they don't understand the problem and start jumping into producing stuff without understanding the decision that you're trying to solve. And data scientists out there will argue, well, it's my job to go and understand that. But it's, for me, I think we need a mixed economy of a lot of project data analysts supplemented by some ninja data scientists for the really top end application. But I think in today's market, 70% of those jobs could probably be done by a project data analyst. So all of your things like automation, simple app development, which is low code, it's in Microsoft suites, and we do things like dashboards and data pipelines. If you're taught how to do it, then you can do it, and it's part of your job. So it would be the health and safety manager's job to produce the health and safety dashboards, which is what they do today. Make sure you got the right pipelines, look at the context of the data and make sure you're making the right sort of recommendations from your data. So that's really important. In terms of upskilling, we've got our meetup, the London Project Data Analytics meetup. We've got various other ones I'll talk about in a sec. And we've got additional events where we're trying to work with the APM, PMI and the MPA, and BCS are very welcome to come and join the party. And we work with other sort of meetups as well, like the London Business Analytics Group run by Mark Wilcock and various other people. We've got Project Hack, I'll talk about that in a minute, and we've got the Academy. So the Academy is it's funded by government, 95 to 100% funded by government. It's every 2 to 3 months, 15-month scheme, and it gives you a foundation degree. So it's through the apprenticeship scheme, but just ignore the word apprenticeship. It's not what you think it is. It's just basically a pot of money which has been taken from your organization as tax, and it's now available to you to upskill. Any age, you know, we've got guys in the 60s and we've got people from 19 upwards. So it's about learning about this stuff in a project context. So the Project Data Analytics meetup, we've got the London one, that's 4,800 members, and we've got Bristol, Northwest, Yorkshire and Aberdeen. In total it's way over 6,000 members. In terms of the apprenticeship, there's a bit.ly link there. Take a screen grab of that, or go onto the Projecting Success website, you'll find it on there. So it is basically free, because it's all funded, training's all funded through the levy, or if you're a very small company, you just got to pay 5%. So become a pathfinder, you know, and start to explore a lot of that white space I've been talking about. Get involved in data trust, get involved in all this other stuff, right, and disrupt the status quo, because it's coming. We've got this hackathon. So it was 2,000 worth of prizes, it's now 3,000. I've put a little thing over the top of that. Because we've got another sponsor, so £3,000 worth of prizes. It's a tenner to get in, thereabouts. There's a discount link there at the bottom, and all that money goes to cancer research, less VAT and Eventbrite fees. So it's not a money-making venture. We do it as a community thing to expose you to this capability and to inspire you on what can be done. And when you look at what can be done in a weekend, you'll be gobsmacked. So this is what one team did. They should have won, but they came second. So I voted them to win, but lots of other people voted as well. So Baker Hughes's data on 96,000 activities on Christmas trees in the North Sea. So basically it's all the bit that goes underneath the well, you know, all the pipework that goes underneath the well in the North Sea. 96,000 activities, and they wanted to look at which of those activities were more predisposed to variance, and which of those activities were badly estimated at the start, and they solved that so they could see the departments where the greatest problems were, and they used machine learning to go back and refine those initial estimates, and they did that in 2 days. So if you can do that in 2 days, just imagine what you can do in a few weeks. Phenomenal. So basically this future is inevitable, and in some cases it's here. From my perspective, it's not uncertain in terms of this is going to happen. It's more about the pace and our engagement with it, and that's what I'm trying to influence through things like a task force, etc. And many of these capabilities are available today, but we lack momentum. I think the task force is going to help that, but we all need to pull in one direction, right? I keep saying that the country's on its uppers. We all need to really work together so we can drive forward project delivery. If we make projects more predictable, we've got greater confidence in delivery, we'll get more investments, the insurance companies will invest in infrastructure, etc., etc., etc. So we've got a great opportunity to make a difference. There's some companies out there who's trying to solve this themselves, and we can move a lot quicker if we all work together. If we start to open up this data, I'm not saying you make it all in the public domain, because some of it is very sensitive, but with the right approaches you can aggregate it, pseudonymize it, use differentiated privacy, etc. Business models will be impacted. So there's some companies out there who's going to be facing a blockbuster moment if they don't change, and you've got to work up your strategies and plans to react to this. And some roles is going to be hugely impacted. So I would say get involved. So come along to the meetups, get involved in the hackathons, And if you can blag it with your boss, then get involved in the apprenticeship as well, so the academy. So upskill and adapt. Winter's coming. That's me. Hunt me out on LinkedIn. I do post a lot of stuff on this. Keep you plugged into the latest and greatest stuff. So that's it basically. We've got about another 12 minutes. Have you got any more questions for me? If anybody wants to have a chat.
No, thank you, Martin. That's a lot of insight there into the world of data and analytics. And we've got it's probably a statement rather than a question. So John Ryan, he asked a question earlier. He's saying, in some respects, the way you've been talking about managing projects outside factories bears an uncanny resemblance to things we used to do to manage workflow inside factories.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to say about that. That's probably mine.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think
and just have a chat about that. Is it possible you can bring him off mute?
let me have a look. We should be able to actually, yeah. Let's try that now. So where is he, John? John, if you're okay, we're gonna try and ask you to come off mute. If you want to just add a bit more color and context to that statement. So you should be able to speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good job.
Well, it so happens I had said I'm well retired now, but a project management is one of these things that goes on, as you say, the same old stuff comes up time and again. And some of the things I got into in my working life before I ended up at MMU involved some major projects. Like I happened to working for the company that made the engines and driven equipment modules for BP's first oil production in the North Sea.
Right.
That involved a certain amount of project management. And then, you know, high quality engineering, you've got a lot of data management about production times and the way the product structure. So also using data to manage and schedule work goes on anyway. But the very interesting thing about that experience is that I wasn't working at the top level of the project, and working in a major subcontractor who were after establishing a name to be, they had already made equipment to go out into the desert to pump oil and stuff around the place. This was going to the North Sea, a new market. And BP had asked for delivery of equipment for installation the following summer and the MD of Ruston, the firm I worked for, gave a presentation, a serious presentation, basically telling people it was a new area for the technology and the working environment. The entire oil industry believed that BP's idea of delivery for next summer was totally unrealistic. But the main message was, we hadn't got to get the blame.
Yeah.
So the place stood in its head practically to produce the engines in a year, and then BP discovered it was a year too early. But a lot of this stuff is managed by collecting data and using data. And when you start looking at the data, you discover interesting things, like if you're making parts in batches, if your own factory is working late, placing orders early doesn't help. It just puts more work into the factory, blocks up working capital and keeps you late. If you're dealing with people outside of the business, then you give them a lot more notice to sort themselves out. But that is counterintuitive.
Yeah.
When you look at the data, it tells you loud and clear, this is what's going on.
So in terms of machine learning, the way it works is basically learning from experience, right? So it takes all of your experience before and it looks for patterns in that experience and then reads it back at you. So instead of us doing that through the human brain and extracting these insights and calling them lessons learned, let's stay in the complexity and let the machine work that complexity for us and then bubble up these insights. And that's what we need to be doing. And I think that's the big turning point with machine learning, is we don't need to be summarizing this complexity ourselves. We stay in the complexity and work in it and get some people tooled up who understand the best way of leveraging that complexity so you can get the insights out of it. So everything you spoke about, so we've been doing benchmarking in the North Sea for 20 years, so you know that a certain type of project should take you 5 years to deliver, so that's the benchmark, is 5 years. But at a work breakdown structure level, it's very difficult to get the variance out of that, the insights, the correlation with the weather, the correlation with your suppliers, the correlation with the subsea conditions, etc. So we can get that now because you get lots of different features in your data set, and it's that feature in the data set which you can understand its bearing on project outcomes. So you weight the features and they become more dominant in some areas and less dominant in others based upon your aggregation of data in that area. So it's all just fundamental data science basically, and we can get really good at this as project delivery professionals and start to give some insights which just like 3 or 4 years ago would have been unimaginable. So it's a really exciting job, I think. Any more questions, Asim?
No, thank you for that one. And that was quite good to get John on to clarify that.
Yeah, thanks, John.
So what else have we got? I think yes, there is one more. James Best. Surely part of the problem could be resolved by changing the project management certification syllabus to enable PMs of tomorrow and allow the current PMs to evolve in their learning.
I've been looking at this actually, John, and I think that it's a different syllabus, right? And this thing we're teaching, it's a 15-month scheme, right, as an apprenticeship. So if you do a level 3 project controls apprenticeship, it's 3 years, right? And the level 4, which is the next one up that we're doing, is 15 months. And if you smash them together, then something's got to give. So for me, we don't teach about project management and project controls. We skim over the top of it for context, but it's more about the project perspective. So we teach and we say, if you're looking at an Amazon project, right, so you're working on Amazon data, you've got petabytes of data streaming in real time. It's all nicely structured because it's coming out of an ordering system, and you've got recommender systems because you've got billions of orders, right? That's a completely different project to a risk management tool where there's 15 people writing up the risks all differently, right? So there's no commonality with it. They're all different taxonomies and ontologies using different words for it. Data volumes are a lot smaller. So you probably got 100 risks in your risk register if you're lucky. They get updated once a month, not every millisecond, right? So it's a completely different sort of problem. So if you go on a standard data analyst training, you're taught about data analyst tools based around the full gambit, right? You might be in retail or you might be in projects. So we think that the project problem is very, very different because we're trying to solve some difficult problems. This is not a constrained thing. A project is not a constrained environment. So people talk about complex projects, and I don't think there's such a thing as a complex project. So Network Rail, for instance, if they're putting track down, so HS2, putting down 50 miles of track is not complex, right? You do 1 mile, you do another mile, you do another mile, you do another mile. If you're building a house, it's a simple project, but it becomes complex in a COVID environment because everything's moving around, your suppliers have stopped, etc. You can't get your brickie on site, etc. So there's no such thing as a complex project. It's the different components of it, I think. So yeah, I think it's all fascinating, really fascinating. And I think data science can unpack all of this for us. And instead of looking at a project as a unique thing, which is part of the definition of a project, if we see that at a functional level, so procurement, engineering, integration, there's a lot of similarity in the processes. If you look at what's gone wrong with Crossrail 2 about rolling stock integration, signaling, that sort of stuff, if you worked on a defence project, you'd have expected that problem to arise. If you're digging holes and you're doing a construction project and putting stations in, you probably don't expect that to rise because you've got a different perspective, you've got a different set of experience. And I think that's where the data works in your favor because you can now start to get some insights on that basis.
Brilliant. Wow. Thank you so much. Just conscious of time, I think we have pretty much maxed out that talk. We started a couple of minutes early as well, and we've gone through to 8 o'clock pretty much. So I would like to thank you very much for the insight. I think it's a big wake-up call for many of us. A lot to think about around project management and the needs for this kind of disruption. As you said, it hasn't really changed over the decades, and we definitely need a step change. And hopefully your passion that we can see from this talk and all the work that you're doing around data analytics, hopefully that's a catalyst and a game changer for the whole industry. So really appreciate that, Martin. Thank you so much.
Yes, my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And if you can, come along to the hackathon. And if you can't afford the tenner, just let me know, and I'll send you a free ticket. I just charge a tenner to make sure that the people turn up if they say they're turning up. But if you can't afford it, if you're skint, then just drop me a mail and I'll send you a free ticket. But please come along. It's for your benefit. You'll see what it's all about. Just get involved. The world's changing. It's exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've shared your LinkedIn details and your QR code. So I think hopefully people will reach out to you and connect with you. So just the final couple of things. As a gesture of goodwill and thank you to our speakers, we normally present them with a book. Obviously, we can't hand that over to you at this moment, Martin, but BCS headquarters will be posting User Experience Foundations out to you very soon, I'm sure.
Super, we really appreciate that. Thank you, Asim.
Yeah, that will be in the post. And for everybody who attended, you will get a request to complete a survey. I think that's really valuable feedback for us and for the speakers, so please do take a few seconds to complete that. And just final plug before we finish is for the next talk. So as David mentioned just at the start, we have got something on Monday the 9th of November, and it's a webinar on resistance is good, and that's going to be actually a Zoom session, an interactive Zoom session. We'll be going into breakout rooms, so it's something quite groundbreaking in terms of what we've been doing from a presentation perspective. And Andy Taylor from People Deliver Projects is going to do that with Jess, and it's an experimental format where we'll be replacing the live theatre and interactive video with a facilitated workshop, and it's going to use a metaphoric project story to provoke and understand learning. So it's going to be something very different. I'd recommend you go onto the website and register for that event. So that's not that far off, just a few weeks off. And finally, thank you to Morris for being my support on this. And he's going to hopefully revamp our LinkedIn page. So the BCS PROMS G LinkedIn page is there. I would also request that you try and join that. But hopefully you'll get a bit more on that from Morris over the next few weeks and months. And I'll just draw an end to that, unless you want to say anything else, Martin. Thank you very much once again.
Thanks a lot for making it happen, Asim. That's all down to you, so thank you. I appreciate it. You're a good man. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Take care. Thank you, everybody, for joining
as well. I appreciate it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Take care. Okay. All the best. Take care. Stay safe, all.
Yeah, cheers all. Bye.